I'm Lena. My husband Blake thought he was a genius when he served me divorce papers, claiming our $50 million real estate empire was solely his creation. He called me just a supportive wife in court documents. What he didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything for 2 years, and his entire plan was about to backfire spectacularly. Blake wasn't just planning to leave me, he was planning to take everything and make sure I walked away with nothing. But Blake made one fatal error. He forgot that I wasn't just his wife. I was the architect behind the scene of everything he claimed to build alone. While he was busy playing CEO for the cameras, I was the one who actually knew how every deal worked, who every client was, and where every dollar came from. The first crack in my world came on a Tuesday evening in March. I was in our home office, reviewing client proposals for our next luxury development, when I heard Blake on a phone call in his study. The walls in our house aren't thick, and his voice carries when he gets animated. "Victoria, we need to discuss the wife problem," he said, and something in his tone made me freeze. I set down my pen and moved closer to the shared wall, my heart starting to race. What was Blake referring to as the wife problem? "She's been too involved in the business side," his voice continued. "The financial records show her name on everything, and that's going to complicate things. We need to establish some distance before we move forward." My stomach dropped. What was the wife problem? Move forward with what? Then I heard the bombshell that confirmed it. I was definitely the wife he was talking about. "Look, Lena's good at handling paperwork and client calls, but let's be honest, she's not the brains behind this operation. She just followed my instructions and managed some admin work. Any competent assistant could have done what she did." Admin work. Paperwork and client calls. I stared at the proposals spread across my desk, deals I'd negotiated, relationships I'd built, marketing strategies I'd developed. The Henderson luxury condos that had netted us $8 million? I'd found that property, convinced the seller to work with us, and managed every aspect of the development. The Riverside Estate project that put us on the map? That was my design vision and my client relationships that made it happen. "The key is documenting that I was the decision maker," Blake continued. "I need to be on record as the primary business contact moving forward. Can you help me restructure things so it's clear she was just supportive?" Just supportive. The words hit me like ice water. I spent the next hour sitting in that office, staring at 6 years of our life together spread across those documents. Every late night I worked. Every client crisis I'd handled while he was traveling. Every brilliant idea we'd refined that he'd presented as his own. Blake was systematically erasing me from our success story. And apparently, he had professional help doing it. The next morning, I did something I'd never done in 6 years of marriage. I went through Blake's personal computer while he was in the shower. Call it intuition, call it desperation, but that overheard phone call had awakened something primal in me. What I found made my blood run cold. Hidden in a folder labeled Golf Scores were bank statements for 3 offshore accounts I'd never seen before. Cayman Islands, Switzerland, the Bahamas. Total balance, $12.3 million. Money that should have been in our business accounts, money that represented years of profits from deals I'd negotiated and managed. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the email chain between Blake and Victoria that laid out their asset protection strategy in excruciating detail. Phase 1 complete, Victoria had written just 2 weeks earlier. "We've successfully moved the liquid assets to protected accounts. Phase 2 involves establishing that the business is struggling financially. I need you to start documenting losses and decreased revenue. Create a paper trail showing the company is worth significantly less than actual value." Blake's response made me nauseous. Already started. Moved $800,000 last month under equipment purchases that don't exist. "Lena handles the books, but she trusts me completely. She'll never think to question my explanations." They'd been planning this for months. Every time Blake had mentioned tough months or tightening our belts, he'd been systematically stealing from our joint accounts. When he told me we needed to be conservative with spending, he was actually moving millions into accounts only he could access. The final email in the chain was dated 3 days ago, and it said, "Blake, remember. The key is showing she was never a true business partner. Just a helpful spouse who occasionally answered phones." I need you to start excluding her from all business decisions immediately. We need a clear pattern of separation before filing. I screenshotted everything, uploaded it to a secure cloud account, and sat back in his chair trying to process the magnitude of their betrayal. This wasn't just about divorce. This was about erasing me completely and stealing everything we had worked to build. Over the next 2 weeks, Blake's behavior shifted so dramatically that I wondered how I'd missed the signs before. Or maybe I just hadn't wanted to see them. Suddenly, meetings I'd always attended were happening without me. The Monday morning contractor briefings I'd run for 3 years? I'll handle those from now on, babe. Just get some rest and focus on the home, he'll say. The quarterly client dinners where I'd built relationships with our biggest accounts? These are getting pretty technical. Probably boring for you. If things were normal, I'd have thought he was just being the caring husband I married 6 years ago. But things were far from normal. He changed passwords on systems I'd built and managed for years. When I asked about it, he shrugged and said the IT company recommended enhanced security protocols. The social media accounts that had brought in 60% of our business, accounts I'd grown from 0 to 500K followers, suddenly required his approval for every post. But the most infuriating moment came during a call with our biggest client, Patricia Hendricks, whose $15 million estate project had been my baby from day one. I was in the kitchen making lunch when Blake took the call in the living room, not realizing I could hear every word. Patricia, I need to let you know that Lena is stepping back from the business side of things, he said smoothly. She's decided to focus more on family, so I'll be your primary contact moving forward. I dropped the sandwich I was making. Stepping back? I'd spoken to Patricia just yesterday about marble selections for her master bathroom. That's surprising, Patricia's voice came through the speakerphone. Lena has been so hands-on with every detail. She's the one who found those vintage fixtures I loved. Oh, she'll still be involved in some of the decorative decisions, Blake said, and I could hear the condescension dripping from his voice. But the business strategy, contracts, budgets, that's always been my department. Lena's more of a creative consultant. Creative consultant. I'd negotiated every contract, managed every budget, and solved every crisis on that project. But according to Blake, I was just the woman who picked out pretty fixtures. After he hung up, I walked into the living room where he was typing on his laptop, probably updating Victoria on his latest lie. Patricia seemed surprised about my stepping back, I said carefully. Blake didn't even look up from his screen. Well, let's be honest, Lena. You've been spread pretty thin lately. Maybe it's time to let me handle the complex stuff while you focus on what you're good at. What I was good at. As if 6 years of building this business together meant nothing. I didn't argue, I didn't talk back. I just smiled like the good, clueless wife he thought I was. The trap came disguised as a routine business meeting. Blake scheduled it for a Thursday afternoon, asking me to meet him and our new business attorney at Victoria's law firm to update some partnership documentation. I should have known something was wrong when Blake was unusually attentive that week, bringing me coffee in the morning and complimenting my hair. Victoria's office was all glass and chrome, designed to intimidate. She greeted me with a smile that never reached her eyes and a handshake that lingered just long enough to feel territorial. Lena, it's wonderful to finally meet Blake's wife. He's told me so much about your support over the years. The documents she slid across the mahogany conference table looked official and overwhelming, pages of legal language about restructuring partnership agreements and optimizing tax advantages. But buried in the fine print was language that would have made me a silent partner with no decision-making authority. This is really just a formality, Blake explained, his hand resting on my shoulder in what looked like affection but felt like pressure. With the business growing so much, we need clearer definitions of roles and responsibilities. Victoria leaned forward, her manicured fingers pointing to signature lines. These documents simply formalize what's already been the practical arrangement. Blake as the primary business operator, you as the supportive spouse. It protects both of you. I read the section she'd highlighted. The language was clinical and devastating. The secondary party, Lena Ashford, acknowledges her role as non-essential personnel in daily business operations and waives any claim to decision-making authority in Ashford Development, LLC. Non-essential personnel. In the company I'd helped build from nothing. I need time to review this, I said, pushing the documents back across the table. Blake's grip on my shoulder tightened. Lena, we've already discussed this. It's just paperwork. Then it can wait until I understand what I'm signing. Victoria's smile became sharper. Of course. Though I should mention, there are some time-sensitive tax advantages that expire at the end of this month. Waiting could cost you both significantly. The pressure was subtle but unmistakable. Sign now or face financial consequences. Accept your diminished role or risk losing everything. I stood up, gathering my purse with hands that only trembled slightly. I'll get back to you. As I walked out of that glass office, I could feel their eyes on my back. Blake was probably panicking, wondering if I suspected anything. Victoria was likely calculating her next move. What neither of them realized was that I'd been recording the entire meeting on my phone. The trap they'd set was about to become their cage. 2 days after that disastrous meeting at Victoria's office, I found the smoking gun that changed everything. Blake had left his American Express statements on his desk. Probably another oversight designed to show me how financially strained we supposedly were. But as I flipped through the pages, my eyes caught something that made my heart stop. For charges to the Ritz-Carlton Chicago, all on dates when Blake claimed to be at investor meetings. But here's what made my blood boil. Victoria Merrick had posted Instagram stories from the exact same hotel on the exact same dates, showing champagne glasses and silk sheets with captions like, "Business trips don't have to be boring." I dove deeper into his credit card history, and the pattern became crystal clear. Expensive dinners for two when he claimed to be eating alone. Hotel suites when he supposedly stayed with college buddies. Victoria's favorite jewelry store charges that coincided with her social media posts showing off new diamond earrings. They weren't just business partners in destroying me, they were lovers. But the real gut punch came when I accessed Victoria's laptop during a bathroom break at our follow-up meeting. I had secretly watched her type her password earlier and hoped to find something I could use if the opportunity presented itself. And it just did. Left open on her screen was a document titled Ashford Strategy Template. The file contained detailed strategies she'd used with other wealthy husbands. Phase 1. Establish wife as non-contributor. Phase 2. Transfer assets to protected accounts. Phase 3. Create documentation of financial struggle. Phase 4. File for divorce with minimal settlement obligations. Below that were screenshots and notes from previous clients praising her work. Victoria helped me protect $30 million from my ex-wife's claims, one said. Saved me millions in what could have been a devastating divorce. She made sure my wife couldn't touch the business I built. Another said. This template. This wasn't just about my marriage, this was a business model. There were at least 12 other cases detailed in that folder. 12 other women who'd been systematically erased from their own success stories, painted as gold-digging wives instead of business partners. Victoria Merrick wasn't just Blake's attorney and mistress, she was running a sophisticated operation to help wealthy men steal from their wives. The final document in the folder was titled Post-Divorce Relationship Management, with a section that made me physically nauseous. Once divorce is finalized and assets are protected, client and attorney can pursue personal relationship without legal complications. They'd planned our entire divorce around their affair. Every legal strategy, every asset transfer, every lie about my contributions, it was all designed to clear the path for their new life together, funded by the empire I'd helped build. I photographed everything, uploaded it to my secure cloud storage, and walked back into that conference room with a smile on my face. Victoria was explaining some complex tax structure. Blake was nodding along like he understood, and neither of them had any idea that their entire scheme was now documented in excruciating detail. All this happened in less than 3 minutes. But it felt like a lifetime. This all sounds very thorough, I said sweetly when she returned. I'm sure Blake made the right choice in selecting you as our lawyer, and you two make quite the team. The look on her face was almost worth everything I'd been through. It was now time for me to strike back. That evening, I called Blake into our home office for what I told him was a serious conversation about our future. He walked in expecting to pressure me into signing Victoria's documents. Instead, he found me sitting behind our desk with a laptop, a stack of papers, and a recording device. "Sit down, Blake. We need to talk." He settled into the chair across from me. The same chair where we'd made every major business decision for 6 years. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I know about the offshore accounts," I began, watching his face go pale. "I know about the asset transfers. I know about Victoria. And I know this whole thing is a template she's used to destroy other marriages." Blake opened his mouth to deny it, but I held up my hand. "Let me finish. You see, while you and Victoria were planning my destruction, I was doing something you never expected. I was documenting everything." I opened my laptop and pressed play on the first recording. Blake's voice filled the room. "The key is documenting that I was the decision maker. I need to be on record as the primary business contact moving forward." His face went white as his own words played back to him. "That's from March 15th, I said calmly. "I have documentation proving my role in building this business, even for some of my ideas that you claim to be yours." I clicked to the next file. Victoria's voice. "Remember, the key is showing she was never a true business partner." "This is from your phone calls," I continued. Amazing how sound carries through these old walls. Blake was gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles were white. "Lena, let me explain." "Oh, I'm not done yet." I pulled out a folder thick with documents. "While you were moving money to your secret accounts, I was securing our client relationships. Patricia Hendricks, the Johnsons, the Chin family, yes, all of them. Turns out when you tell clients that their primary contact is stepping back from business, they get concerned about service quality." I slid client emails across the desk. "These are written confirmations that they prefer to work directly with me. Funny thing about relationships, Blake, you can't steal them. You have to earn them." His voice was barely a whisper. "What do you want?" "What I want is justice. And fortunately, as a 50% owner of Ashford Development LLC, I have certain rights you forgot about." I pulled out bank statements showing transactions he'd never seen. "While you were hiding money, I was protecting our legitimate assets. The Henderson Project funds, the Riverside deposits, the equipment loans, all safely transferred to accounts that require both our signatures." Blake shot to his feet. "You can't do that. That's our operating capital." "Our operating capital," I repeated. "Exactly. Our business. Our assets. Our partnership that you tried to dissolve on paper while keeping all the benefits." I stood up slowly, enjoying the moment I'd been planning for weeks. "Here's what's going to happen, Blake. You're going to transfer every penny back from those offshore accounts. You're going to end whatever this thing is with Victoria. And you're going to publicly acknowledge my role in building this business. And if I don't?" I smiled and pressed play on one final recording, Victoria's voice discussing their post-divorce relationship management plan. "Then I release everything. The affairs, the asset hiding, the fact that your attorney has been running a scam to help wealthy husbands steal from their wives. I wonder how her law license will survive that kind of scrutiny." For the first time in months, Blake was completely speechless. He'd walked into our office thinking he was in control, and discovered that his wife, his non-essential personnel, had been playing a completely different game. Chess, not checkers. And checkmate. The next morning, I woke up to Blake screaming into his phone in the kitchen. Even from upstairs, I could hear every word of his conversation with Victoria. "What do you mean the accounts are frozen? How's that possible?" I'd moved fast after our conversation, filing legal motions to freeze all assets pending a full financial audit. As a 50% business owner, it was completely within my rights. But Blake had apparently never considered that possibility. "She recorded everything, Victoria. Every conversation, every meeting. She has evidence of the transfers, the affair, your entire operation." I walked downstairs to find Blake pacing like a caged animal, his hair disheveled, still in yesterday's clothes. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. "Fix this," he snarled into the phone. "I don't care how. Make this go away." When he saw me, his expression shifted to something I'd never seen before, pure rage mixed with panic. "You think you're so smart," he said after hanging up. "But you have no idea what you've started. Victoria knows judges, has connections you can't imagine. We'll bury you in legal fees alone." "Is that a threat, Blake?" It's a promise. You want to play hardball? Fine. But when this is over, you'll have nothing. No business, no house, no reputation. I'll make sure everyone knows you're an unstable, vindictive woman who tried to steal from her own husband. The irony was breathtaking. The man who'd actually stolen millions was calling me a thief. But Blake was just getting started. Over the next week, he launched a campaign to discredit me that was as vicious as it was desperate. He called our mutual friends, claiming I'd had a breakdown and was making false accusations. He reached out to business contacts, warning them that I was no longer authorized to speak for the company. The final straw came at the Riverside Country Club, where we'd been members for 6 years of our marriage. Blake cornered me at the bar during their monthly mixer, his voice loud enough for half the room to hear. "Everyone should know that my wife has been embezzling from our business," he announced, swaying slightly. He'd clearly been drinking. "She's transferred company funds illegally and is trying to frame me for her crimes." The room went silent. Our friends and business associates stared in shock as Blake continued his public meltdown. "She's mentally unstable. Paranoid. I've been trying to protect her, but she's crossed a line." I stood up slowly, looking around at faces I'd known for years. People I'd done business with, shared dinners with, trusted. "Is that really the story you want to go with, Blake?" I asked calmly. "Because I have recordings that tell a very different version of events." His face went red. "You're bluffing." I pulled out my phone and pressed play. As I walked out of that country club, I could hear the whispers starting behind me. But they weren't about my mental breakdown. They were about Blake's lies, his affair, and the public meltdown that had just revealed his true character to everyone who mattered. Victoria's sophisticated legal strategy was crumbling, and Blake's reputation was in ruins. But the best part? This was just the beginning. 6 months later, I walked into the Superior Court of California wearing my Navy power suit and carrying a briefcase that contained 6 years of evidence. The media had gotten wind of the case. Real estate mogul's wife claims she built his empire, and the courtroom was packed with reporters, business associates, and curious onlookers. Blake sat at the defendant's table with his new attorney. Victoria had been forced to withdraw when her conflict of interest became undeniable. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by months of frozen assets and crumbling business relationships. The confident man who'd graced magazine covers was gone, replaced by someone who kept glancing nervously at the gallery. "Your Honor," my attorney began, "we will prove that Mrs. Lena Ashford was not merely a supportive spouse, as the defendant claims, but was in fact the primary architect of Ashford Development LLC's success." The evidence presentation was methodical and devastating. We started with the recordings, Blake's own voice admitting I handled the books, managed clients, and made strategic decisions while he focused on the big picture. The jury listened in stunned silence as his words contradicted everything in his court filings. "Lena's good at handling paperwork and client calls, but let's be honest, she's not the brains behind this operation," played through the courtroom speakers. Several jurors shook their heads in disgust. Next came the financial records showing the offshore accounts, the systematic asset transfers, and the email chain with Victoria detailing their asset protection strategy. When the judge saw evidence that Blake had hidden $12.3 million while claiming financial hardship, his expression turned thunderous. But the most powerful moment came when we presented client testimonials. Patricia Hendricks took the stand and testified that I was her primary contact for the $15 million estate project, that I'd negotiated every detail and solved every crisis. "I never dealt with Blake directly," she said firmly. "Lena was the one who understood my vision, found the rare materials I wanted, and delivered the project on time and under budget. Without her expertise, that project would have been a disaster." One by one, our biggest clients confirmed the same thing. I was their point person, their problem solver, their trusted advisor. Blake was just the face who showed up for ribbon cuttings and photo opportunities. By the end of the first day, Blake's reputation wasn't just crumbling, it was obliterated. The self-made mogul narrative had been exposed as a complete fabrication, and everyone in that courtroom knew it. Desperate times called for desperate measures, and Blake's response was as predictable as it was pathetic. On day 2 of proceedings, his attorney stood up with a counter-complaint that made my blood boil. Your Honor, we're filing charges of theft, embezzlement, and defamation against Mrs. Lena Ashford. She illegally transferred business assets, stole client relationships, and has conducted a malicious campaign to destroy my client's reputation. The audacity was breathtaking. The man who'd hidden millions in offshore accounts was claiming I was the thief. Mrs. Lena Ashford used her access to company accounts to steal operational funds, the attorney continued. She manipulated clients against my client and recorded private conversations without consent. This is nothing more than a vindictive woman trying to destroy the business her husband built. They submitted evidence that I'd transferred company funds without authorization, conveniently ignoring that as a 50% owner, those transfers were completely legal. They claimed my client communications were corporate espionage and that my recordings violated privacy laws. But their most desperate move was attempting to discredit the recordings themselves. They brought in an audio expert who claimed the files had been selectively edited and taken out of context. They suggested I'd manipulated the evidence to frame an innocent man. Blake even took the stand to paint himself as the victim of an elaborate scheme. With tears in his eyes, actual tears. He testified that I'd changed over the years, becoming paranoid and controlling. I tried to protect her from the stress of business decisions, he said, his voice breaking. She was struggling with the pressures of being a business owner's wife. I never imagined she'd turn against me like this. The performance was almost convincing. Almost. But they'd made one critical error in their desperation. They'd underestimated the depth of my preparation and the loyalty of the people who actually knew the truth. The unraveling began when my attorney cross-examined Blake about his relationship with Victoria Merrick. Under oath, with reporters scribbling furiously, Blake had to admit to the affair that had driven his entire scheme. So you were having an intimate relationship with your attorney while planning this divorce? My lawyer asked. That's not relevant to. Your Honor, it's absolutely relevant. Mrs. Merrick was representing Mr. Ashford while simultaneously planning a personal relationship with him. This is a clear ethical violation that invalidates every piece of legal advice she provided. The judge's face was grim as he reviewed the evidence of Victoria's systematic scheme to help wealthy husbands hide assets from their wives. The template document, the testimonials from previous clients, the post-divorce relationship management plan. It painted a picture of legal malpractice on a staggering scale. But the killing blow came from Blake's own recordings. In his desperation to discredit me, he'd forgotten that every conversation works both ways. When we played the full context of his calls with Victoria, his own words destroyed his case. I need to establish that she was never a real business partner, his voice echoed through the courtroom. The truth is, Lena built most of the client relationships, but legally, I needed to look like she was just answering phones. The truth is, Lena built most of the client relationships. His own admission, under oath, that I was the real architect of our success. Then came the client parade. Patricia Hendricks returned to the stand, but this time she brought contracts, emails, and meeting notes, all showing that every major decision came through me. The Chin family's patriarch testified that he'd never met Blake until the final contract signing, that all negotiations had been with Mrs. Lena. She designed our dream home, he said simply. Mr. Blake? He just showed up to shake hands. The final nail in the coffin was David Morrison, our largest commercial client, who brought 14 years of email correspondence. Every strategic decision, every crisis management, every innovative solution. It was all documented in black and white with my name on it. Mrs. Ashford didn't just contribute to this business, he testified. She was the business. Blake was the salesman, but Lena was the CEO. When Judge Harrison delivered his verdict, the courtroom was so quiet you could hear the reporters' pens scratching across their notepads. The evidence presented in this case reveals a pattern of deception that goes far beyond a simple marital dispute, he began. Mr. Ashford systematically attempted to erase his wife's contributions to their joint business while simultaneously stealing marital assets and planning his exit strategy with his attorney. The financial award was better than I'd dared hope. 70% of all business assets, including the hidden offshore accounts. Blake would be left with barely enough to restart his career, assuming anyone in the industry would still work with him. But the financial victory was just the beginning. The judge referred Blake's case to the district attorney for criminal charges related to asset hiding and financial fraud. In California, deliberately concealing assets during divorce proceedings isn't just unethical, it's a felony. Victoria's punishment was even more satisfying. The state bar launched an immediate investigation into her template scheme for helping wealthy husbands defraud their wives. Her law license was suspended pending a full review, and several of her previous clients were facing their own legal reckonings as their ex-wives came forward with new evidence. This court finds that Mrs. Ashford was not merely a supportive spouse, but was in fact the primary operational force behind Ashford Development LLC, Judge Harrison concluded. The evidence shows that without her expertise, relationships, and strategic vision, there would be no business for Mr. Ashford to claim. As the gavel fell, I felt 14 years of invisible contributions finally acknowledged. The empire I'd built was officially mine, and the man who'd tried to steal it was left with nothing but the reputation he'd destroyed himself. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around me asking for statements, but I walked past them in silence. I had nothing left to prove to the world. The evidence had spoken for itself. Blake caught up with me at my car, his face a mask of rage and desperation. "This isn't over, Lena. I'll appeal. I'll fight this until I turn to face him one last time, the man I'd spent 6 years supporting, building up, believing in." "You are right about one thing, Blake," I said quietly, my voice carrying just enough for the nearby reporters to hear. "I was just a wife. But I was also the CEO, CFO, and visionary you never were." I got in my car and drove away, leaving him standing alone on the courthouse steps with nothing left but the lies he'd told himself. The empire he'd claimed to build was never his to begin with. And now, finally, everyone knew the truth. 6 months after the courthouse victory, I sit in my new corner office overlooking downtown Los Angeles, and for the first time in 6 years, I can breathe freely. The nameplate on my desk reads Lena Ashford, CEO, Lena Sterling Group, a name I chose deliberately. After my grandmother. The office is everything I never had before, bright, modern, with my vision driving every decision. No more hiding behind someone else's shadow. No more pretending my ideas came from Blake's brilliant mind. The walls display my actual achievements. The Henderson Project photos with my signature on the architectural plans, client testimonials that mention my name, industry awards that finally acknowledge my contributions. But the real piece comes from something simpler. When clients call, they ask for me by name. When reporters want to discuss the latest luxury development trends, they interview me directly. When industry publications write about innovative approaches to high-end real estate, my picture appears alongside my quotes. For 6 years, I was the invisible architect of someone else's success story. I solved the problems, built the relationships, and created the strategies while Blake took the credit and the spotlight. The exhaustion of that constant erasure was something I didn't even realize I was carrying until it was finally gone. Now, when I walk into meetings, people stand up to shake my hand. They've heard of Lena Sterling Group, they've read about our client-first approach, and they want to work with the woman who built it from scratch. Not the woman behind the man, not the supportive wife who helped out, but the CEO who earned her reputation through 15-hour days and brilliant strategic thinking. The transformation isn't just professional, it's deeply personal. I no longer second-guess my instincts or defer to someone else's better judgment. When I have an idea, I implement it. When I see a problem, I solve it. When I deserve credit, I take it. This is what peace feels like, finally being seen for who I actually am. The validation started immediately after the court case ended. Patricia Hendricks was the first to call, before I'd even officially launched Lena Sterling Group. "Lena, I have a $20 million project, and I want you to handle it," she said without preamble. "Not some company with your name hidden in the fine print. I want you leading the entire development." Within 3 months, 8 of Ashford Development's former clients had moved their business to Lena Sterling. Not because they felt sorry for me, but because they finally understood what I'd been telling them all along. I was the one they'd been working with all these years. The industry recognition came next. Real Estate Weekly featured me on their cover with the headline, "The Woman Who Built an Empire While Her Husband Took Credit." The article detailed not just my court victory, but my actual contributions to luxury development over the past decade. For the first time, my innovative client management strategies and design insights were attributed to me, not Blake. But the most meaningful validation came from unexpected sources. Women started reaching out, wives, partners, and business co-founders who'd been systematically erased from their own success stories. I received hundreds of emails from women who'd seen their contributions minimized, their roles diminished, their expertise dismissed. Reading your story gave me the courage to demand credit for the marketing campaign that saved our company, wrote Sarah from Denver. My husband had been taking sole credit for 3 years. I documented everything after seeing what you went through, wrote Michelle from Boston. When my business partner tried to push me out, I was ready. I started speaking at women's business conferences, not as someone's wife or silent partner, but as a CEO sharing strategies for protecting your contributions and documenting your value. The response has been overwhelming, standing ovations from audiences who understand exactly what it feels like to be invisible in your own success story. Last month, I was inducted into the Real Estate Development Hall of Fame. An honor that Blake had been nominated for twice, but never received, probably because the committee could never figure out exactly what he'd contributed to our projects. Looking back on this journey, I realized the most important lesson wasn't about revenge or justice. It was about recognizing my own worth before anyone else could take it away. For too long, I believed that being supportive meant being invisible, that being a good partner meant diminishing myself to make someone else shine brighter. I thought loyalty meant accepting less credit, less recognition, less respect than I'd earned. The woman who walked out of that courthouse 18 months ago is completely different from the one who overheard that first devastating phone call. I'm not just more confident or more assertive, I'm more authentically myself. I know what I've built, what I'm capable of, and what I deserve. The documentation that saved me wasn't just about gathering evidence, it was about finally acknowledging my own contributions. Every recording, every email, every client testimonial was proof not just for the court, but for myself. I was never just anything. Today, when people ask about my success, I don't deflect or minimize. I built Lena Sterling Group from the ground up in less than 2 years, secured $50 million in client contracts, and earned recognition as one of the top female entrepreneurs in real estate. I did that. Not as someone's wife, not as anyone's silent partner, but as the CEO I always was. The best part? Blake is still trying to restart his career, but the industry knows the truth now. You can't build lasting success on stolen credit and false claims. Real expertise, real relationships, real value. Those things can't be faked or transferred. They called me just a wife. Now they call me CEO. And finally, both titles mean exactly what they should. If this story of reclaiming your worth resonated with you, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what moments spoke to you most. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself and knowing your value, because your contributions matter and they deserve to be recognized.